What is data and what does it mean to modern day organizations and leadership? Just
It
whatever
is
comes to your brain.
the $1 million question, right? So
And
for me,
we'll dig deeper too. Trust me, Dan's got
of
1,000
course.
questions he's written down here that I'm gonna have to read
I
off.
have.
But we will. But yeah, let's just give us a thought. Give us your big thoughts here.
So for me, I view data as anything that can be stored permanently and recalled by anyone else, right? So the reason data have to be able to be stored and brought back again is how we make any use out of data. And it has to be able to be accessed by somebody other than you, meaning it can't just be in your brain, right? That doesn't count as data because it's not usable by anybody else. But when we think about data with that broad of a definition, it can be words, it can be pictures, it can be audio, it can be numbers, right? There's all sorts of things that do actually count as data that we often don't think about when we start to bring in this idea of data informing what we do. And what I say data does for us as organizations is it's like your instrument panel on your airplane, right? It's not going to tell you where to go. You don't get on board and the pilot says, let's find out where we're going. Oh, look at my instrument panel, right? They already know where they're going. They've made flight plans, but they're going to use that instrument panel to help make sure that they're staying on track with where they want to go. And they're going to use that instrument panel to help them if things go a bit awry and they have to adjust. They're going to take all that input in to be able to make a more refined and appropriate adjustment to those corrections. But also, it's not the end all be all. I think about Captain Sully and his ability to land an airplane in the Hudson. And he did that not necessarily because, he just had the right data and he just followed what the numbers told him. Yes, he needed the right data. He needed to have immediate feedback about what was happening to his engines. He needed immediate feedback about, the speed that his plane was going, his height above the ground. All of that had to be accurate and immediately available to him, well-processed data that had already been analyzed and given to him in the way that he needed it. But he also needed his thousands of hours of training as a military pilot to put that to use and successfully execute a very creative solution that ended up working out, for everybody. So that's how I think about data for organizations.
Yeah, and I think that speaks to the whole different differentiation between what is data and what is knowledge, right?
Yes.
Because data is just the data. It's the information that's out there, the numbers, the words, the images, whatever it might be. But you also have to take that data in and apply it to what you already know and whatever schemas you're already operating with to produce knowledge. Would that be a correct assessment or of what you're talking about?
Yeah, and we talk about oftentimes that knowledge is where you start to integrate many different pieces of data, and many different pieces of experience, many different observations and actual past experiences of your life into something that then can be put into action, right? Data by itself is never inherently actionable. It will give you hints and ideas and direction, point which direction something might be moving, but you need to be able to interpret that, contextualize it, and come up with ideas of options that could utilize that information. And that's where you then sort of move from those data points to the knowledge.
I tend to utilize the word signal a lot when I'm talking about data. I just say this is a signal. These are signals because I want to make sure that who I'm talking to that I've had issues, and I think you probably can relate to this, where I give one data point and that data point was truth now. And it's like I had to constantly say, this is a signal, just one signal, and so I've come to just to use that terminology that data is signals. I don't have.
Is there a difference between data and a signal?
Maybe there is. I'm just saying that's just, yeah.
So I do think that it's going to be a bit of a pedantic difference, but I think there is some value to the difference, which is data are just stored pieces of information, right? So I can store all sorts of pieces of information. And for example, I may have a pedestrian sensor on a bridge. And what the data are that I'm storing is a trigger or a click every time, supposedly, someone walks by it, right? A laser beam gets broken and it goes tink, one pedestrian. But what I'm storing are data points of the number of times that sensor was triggered. Now, I'd like to think that means the number of people who walked by. But really what the data are the number of times that the sensor was triggered. And if there's
it's
a fault
probably
in the
me
trigger,
just going back and forth trying to drive you crazy, like ding, ding,
right?
ding, 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 ding.
Exactly. And so the data could mean many different things. It could actually truly represent the number of people who cross the bridge. It could represent Dan messing with everybody. It could represent like a faulty signal, a faulty sensor, right? Where the sensor was just triggering itself and there was nothing there. It could have been confused by rain or hail, right? And that's where I think the separation between the data and the signal comes, which is the signal for me tends to be when you find something meaningful in the data.
Mm-hmm.
When you found something in the data that is useful, it's directionally correct. It enables you to make a better decision than you would have been able to make without it, right? And again, the signal doesn't have to be 100% accurate. It just has to be useful. Like, are you better off having it than you were without it? So that's where I would separate signal and data.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I think that's good. And I want to get back to what JODA was asking, because I think another important differentiation between what he was describing as a signal and what you said is a sample of one, right? And can a sample of one, like one instance of that piece of data, be meaningful enough to produce a signal?
So yes, because it depends what you're trying to do. If we go back to Captain Sully's example, he had one engine reading, but that was all he needed to know that something was very wrong with his engine, right? So in some instances, a single data point can be a very important signal, right? If my car's engine temperature, is in hot, I only need one of those readings to know that I really should check that out. But if you're trying to do something where you're, to what JODA said earlier, making inferences about a larger population or inferences beyond that single point, or if you want to make inferences over time and talk about a trend in change, then yes, that point's when you need more than just a single data point to say that I have a signal.
Right.